the Miracle on Ice. Do you believe in miracles? 44 years ago today, Miracle on Ice happened.
Beat those dumb commies.
And I've got a question.
Hmm.
Is that the greatest moment in American sports history? There are a few that come to mind. Miracle on Ice is obviously up there.
Mhm.
You have Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in baseball because they took far too long to do that. You have Hank Aaron breaking the home run record.
Mhm.
You have
I'd say return to play post 9/11 was pretty nuts.
Yeah.
So maybe that first pitch.
Yeah.
George
That-
W.
that
Bush
was-
first pitch.
That was nuts.
Yeah. You have the dream team coming together to
Taking over.
flex their
Barcelona.
muscle
Good
as
God.
the basketball power after getting embarrassed in previous Olympics.
That might be the best team we've ever seen in any sport.
In any sport ever.
Yeah.
And the fact that they lived up to every bit of hype that
Yeah.
they had coming into it
It's
was that
it's the
much more impressive.
opposite of the Miracle on Ice team, where it's like a bunch of kids going up against a bunch of professionals in Russia. This was the best professionals in the world crushing a bunch of amateurs,
Yeah,
like doing what the Russians were supposed to do.
that's right. Like they absolutely stomped on them.
I mean, the beatings that they put on countries, they
And they could have been worse.
they stunted on teams. Like they stepped on the brakes
Yeah.
because they were absolutely annihilating teams.
But those are the ones that all come to mind off the bat. But the Miracle on Ice, like all of these two, they have so much more that go into them. Oh, and then how about like Jesse Owens winning gold at the Nazi Olympics
Yeah, I
in
was just gonna
1936?
say, yeah, going back and giving the double bird to Hitler.
That's pretty awesome.
That's a pretty good one.
But you think that in all of these like great American moments in American sports history, we're not talking about like Wilt's 100-point game.
No.
They have far greater meaning. And like the Miracle on Ice, when you have in the thick of coming out of the
Cold
space
War.
race, the Cold War,
Yeah.
you've got your adversary and you have communism versus capitalism
On U.S. soil at Lake Placid.
in the sport that they pride themselves in winning, and you go and you beat them, and it wasn't even the gold medal game either.
No.
It was a semifinal game
Yeah, and not only did you beat them with kids.
that you weren't supposed to win with.
Yeah, you had no chance of that Russian team was absolutely. That's the team that on basketball side when Sabonis took David Robinson and beat him like a redheaded stepchild. That was the that's what they expected.
Yeah.
That was what was supposed to happen. Was we have dudes that you didn't know, like the built in the lab Russians, or I shouldn't even say Russians, the Soviet Republic, and we have mutants everywhere, and we're going to destroy you. I will break you, Ivan Drago style, and that didn't happen. And you get the little Mike Eruzione story.
But I if you think about it, I think it probably is our greatest moment in American sports history.
The combination of athletic achievement with political, I shouldn't say ambitions, the political ramifications of, that period in time, you really only go maybe a couple years further to where you start to see the cooling of the Cold War. So it obviously wasn't the peak of the Cold War because the Cuban
No.
Missile Crisis, but that's the peak, I think, of media, sports, politics as it pertained to the intersection in the world.
And I think if you look at like all these other great American sports moments, like Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier was because of the ugliness within our own country
Mhm.
that was so significant, and it was so awful before and after that.
Yeah.
That made the significance of Jackie Robinson in America's pastime not just breaking the color barrier, but being dominant at the sport as well. Hank Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's all-time home run record.
Mhm.
That's one that always sticks out to me because we hear the stories of the death threats that he got leading up to that.
The two fans circling the bases with him.
Yeah, and Craig Sager being at home
Yeah.
plate, like that, like the stories that come out of that and how well he was received when he actually did it, and seeing that people celebrated Hammer and Hank as the
Mhm.
home run king after when there was, and there was surely there was ugliness that happened
Oh yeah,
after, but the man was worried for his life and
still hitting dingers.
still hitting dangers just over the fence, park him over the fence. I mean, that was a great moment in sports because that was at the time an unbreakable record.
Yeah.
And we never talk about Barry Bonds doing it because, well, you know, the juice. Man, not the OJ juice.
He's still the best of all time.
The steroids. He is a phenomenal baseball player.
We can just put that aside.
But the dream team was more of like we just showing people how great we actually are.
Yes, and not only that, that level of talent, with the exception of Leitner, who's added because of the rules they had back then, the one college guy that they were going to bring along. Every one of those guys is a Hall of Famer, and not only are they a Hall of Famer, a lot of them are still relatively close to their peaks. 1992, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird are not that far removed from 87, 88, 89. They are not that far removed from their greatness. Michael Jordan is probably reaching his apex. Clyde Drexler is at his apex. I mean, you had dudes on that team that were untouchable.
Yeah.
And they were all there. I just quantifying that team, I don't think you can actually do. But because they're so overwhelming, I think you kind of have to look at the Miracle on Ice because what's the one thing this country loves more than anything? It's the underdog story.
Absolutely.
As much as we love the Dream Team and the way they were like Michael Jackson, I mean, you look at the coverage of that team going through Barcelona, and it's unhinged. Well, the funniest thing about that is that John Stockton was the only one who was able to move freely because he looked like every other white dude.
Yeah, people didn't even know he was part of the team.
Didn't even know he was part of the team. Like, he would get off the bus and get into the crowd, and nobody would notice him. He'd have his little fanny pack and his sunglasses on. He'd just move right through.
I'm going to power rank him right now. Miracle on Ice is one.
Mhm.
The Vancouver Ford Tech signed Jesse Owens. I think Jesse Owens
Yep.
in the Berlin Olympics in 1936 in
Heading-
Nazi Germany.
Heading down the path of World War II.
And just knowing that what he was walking into,
Mhm.
performing the way he did, winning. And, like we like the underdog story. We also like flipping the bird at people
Oh,
too.
we do love that.
And then
Especially in their home country.
number 3 is one I haven't even mentioned yet, but I love this story, is Jim Thorpe winning the decathlon in shoes he
Oh.
found in a garbage can in the
Okay.
1912 Olympics.
Okay.
I think they all kind of, it's weird they do come back to Olympics because it is national pride.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think those
It's
three right
the
there for
scale is
me,
bigger.
that's it. That's it, because on the global stage, we just went and said, screw y'all.
I remember the return to play after 9/11.
Oh, that was
That one's a big
that
one
one's
for
probably number
me.
3. That is
Yeah.
number 3. I'm moving Thorpe down to 4.
That one's big for me, obviously, because I enlisted on 9/12. So, like, that 2 weeks was a whirlwind for me. And I remember just the feeling of sports coming back
Yeah.
and just everything that meant. It didn't matter what side of the aisle you were, no matter how much you hated the Yankees or the Mets or didn't care at all. There was something about that return to play. And then, what was it? 2 weeks later, at Giant Stadium, NFL gets underway.
That to me, like the horrific events of 9/11,
Mhm.
that is like going to be seared in my brain. But that week after, where
It's a
literally
fog.
everybody came together, and it was like that was the last time that you can remember like the United States all honestly everybody pulling in the same direction.
Yeah,
Literally everybody was pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, Bush visits the World Trade Center site and the flag raises on the rubble, and this is probably the last time that was like unified national pride. To be honest, I mean, sure that it happens around the Olympics, and that's why I think that the return to play, even though the moment itself is not that big as it pertains to the sports, but the impact of that, at least for me, is going to linger for the rest of my life.
That 30 for 30 was incredible too, where you hear George W. Bush saying, he was wearing a bulletproof vest while he was doing it because, there were threats of like an assassination attempt and they thought that could happen there. And he was just like,
I mean, everything
I'm
was a
gonna throw
credible threat at that point in time.
I'm going to throw this from the mound
Yeah.
and screw what everybody else is telling me. No, I'm going to throw this ball. And he just pipes it right down the middle. He kind of George W's it
Yeah.
all the way off. Like that was a moment in history,
Watch
man.
this drive.
Whether you liked him or not or hated him,
Now watch this drive.
that was a moment in history we can't all forget.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good it's a good power rankings right now. But Miracle on Ice 44 years ago today. The Miracle on Ice happened, and this goes back to the pretzel of the brain of Jeff Rust. The Winter Olympics semifinal hockey match was played
In the
44
spring.
years ago today when spring training is starting in Major League Baseball.
It's spring. The sun's out.
It's fake spring.
You're going with fake ass spring.
Fake ass spring.